Hi, everyone. I'm Priya Natarajan. I'm the current director of Yale's flagship interdisciplinary program, the Franke Program in Science and the Humanities. And I'm absolutely delighted to invite you all to the final closing event of this academic year and this semester. And it is my absolute pleasure today to invite you to a screening of a documentary titled Hummingbird Navigating Rare Disease that was actually made by one of our own undergraduate Franke Fellows. So we offer a fellowship to undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdocs at Yale who have ideas that transcend disciplinary boundaries and give them funding to execute a project. And it's a very competitive selective process. And we've had several cohorts at this point, 6 cohorts of fellows. This is a program that I started since I became director. And so we have a wonderful community of scholars across academic stages. We meet regularly at our events, and we host special events for our fellows. So it's a particular pleasure today to have one of our undergraduate Franke Fellows present the results of the interdisciplinary exciting proposal that they submitted to us. But before I do that, I want to thank the generosity of our benefactors, Mr. and Mrs. Richard and Barbara Franke. And it's because of their generous gift to Yale. They've donated a lot of money to many interdisciplinary ventures at Yale, the Franke Program being the jewel in the crown. We bring you this documentary funded by their generosity, as is the whole program. And one of our undergraduate Franke Fellows, as I just mentioned, Adrian Rolway, who is actually graduating this weekend. So we are waiting for his mother to join us at this screening. We're just absolutely proud, Adrian, at what you've achieved at your time at Yale, and congratulations on graduating. And the sequence is that we will have the showing of the documentary, and then there will be a Q&A, which I am delighted to hand over the charge to our extremely able executive director, Dr. Ty Camp, without whom none of the programming in the Franke program would successfully go. So a big shout out to you, Ty, for all the hard work through this year, this semester, and all past years. So it is my pleasure to give you a brief bio of our filmmaker, Adrian Rolway. He's graduating senior, and he uses his love of storytelling to explore the inner workings of scientific practice. This is a subject that is deeply close to my heart as well. As a scientist and an astrophysicist, I'm also deeply interested in the resonance between the rhetoric and the practice of science, which don't always align. Scientists' own accounts of how they do science doesn't always reflect, because it's often post hoc, and you look back and you write up the sequence of your discovery, or you mention. So when you recollect, you often give a sanitized version of the actual process. Science itself is extremely messy, nonlinear, and complex as a science. So as you'll see, Adrian has very beautifully captured the complexity of scientific practice. He's originally from the United Kingdom, and he has spent the last 6 years making documentaries around the world on a range of subjects, from ecological conservation to vaccine denial. As a Franke Fellow, he created Hummingbird, a joint thesis project in both molecular biology and film studies, his 2 majors. Let's just invite and congratulate Adrian on this before we see the documentary. Adrian?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so happy to see you. Congratulations
Thank
on
you so
graduating
much.
and
I
on this
appreciate it.
documentary. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, and hope you enjoy the film.
Thanks. So I think we should roll the documentary, and I just want to remind you afterwards, we have a nice Q&A session, following which we can retire upstairs for dinner. Thank you.
In their brief and bright dance of life, hummingbirds weave resilience into our world with their shimmering, stalwart quills. They traverse nature's complex and discrete paths, forging new connections between unfamiliar environments. Despite their unassuming size and vivid disguises, they are keystones in nature's intricate mechanisms, guardians of an ever-changing ecology, overseers of an invisible balance. There are few tales more miraculous than hummingbirds.
This event is supposed to capture what connects us, the connective tissue between the families and patients and the people that are fighting for treatments. And our hope is that, tonight is going to be a chance to hear from the people that I am most inspired by: the children, the patients, scientists, the parents, the friends, the community, and bring it all together with music and stories and provide a different kind of rare disease event.
Welcome to our very first Rock and Rare in Kendall Square. Thank you for... Thank you for coming. And before I say a few more words and kick this off, inspiration and emotions is a big part of this event. Like I said, this is very different than maybe what you might be used to normally when you're talking about rare disease. And the two people that inspire me most, that is my daughter, Mila, who is not here with us today, as many of you know, but is why I entered the world of rare disease when my daughter was 6 years old and was diagnosed with Batten disease.
She was hiking and skiing and rock climbing, and she was singing and jumping off of beds. Till around 4 or 5 years old, when she started losing her vision, she started losing her ability to walk and talk and eat, and she was diagnosed with Batten disease.
Batten is a rare genetic disease that affects the brain and nervous system and is most commonly diagnosed in children. In Mila's case, it was caused by one part of her genome or genetic code jumping from its original location and inserting itself into a gene called MFSD8. This is what's known as an insertion mutation, and when it happens to MFSD8, the body can't properly get rid of a harmful substance called lipofuscin, leading to vision loss, seizures, movement problems, and cognitive decline.
Well, it's a funny combination of things that emerge when you get a diagnosis like this, right? You're the only one. One of them is that I felt very special, right? And it was very interesting to have access, not only to the NIH, but I saw doctors at Yale and Harvard and Columbia. Very, very highly skilled researchers were having meetings at, global conferences about the interesting case of me. So that's kind of interesting, even for me. And then at the same time, of course, it's a really isolating experience, mostly because it comes with so much uncertainty, right? So there's no one who can tell you, this is what's going to happen. This is what it's going to look like in a year, or what it's going to look like in 5 years. And there's also no one who exactly shares your experiences.
The reality is that genetic disease is hundreds of millions of people around the world. Of those genetic diseases, there are few dozen that are common and that will ever attract commercial interest to develop a treatment. And then there are 10,000 genetic diseases that are individually rare.
Rare disease is, on the one hand, quite rare. Right? But as a collective experience, all the people with rare diseases is quite a lot of people. And so I think there's always a little bit of tension for me. I'm trying to sort out, okay, on the one hand, I do have this incredibly sort of vanishingly rare condition. On the other hand, this kind of broader experience I share with millions and millions of people. And so how do I relate to all of that?
The enormity of genetic disease really falls on the numbers that rare diseases together make up. And the problem is that there's a disconnect between that and the fact that the clinicians and doctors that are seeing families and patients like mine and my daughter, they still are treating this as if they're these sort of small one-off things that, rarely ever happen. When the reality is that a massive number of people have genetic diseases that are rare.
Sammy is a friend and a collaborator, and he's also one of the oldest known living progeria patients. So please join me in welcoming Sammy to the stage.
To live with progeria is absolutely not easy. It means to have a very short life expectancy. It means to know that I am aging faster in some tissue of my body, in some organs. And so to face all the limitations that this disease has given me.
We have a gene called LMNA, and because it's 78,000 units of DNA long, we just call it LMNA. That's because it encodes for lamin A, a super important protein that keeps cell nuclei stable. In progeria, a single swap in that gene occurs at one letter, which is actually a C to a T, and that produces an abnormal protein called progerin. This is known as a point mutation because it happens at a single point in our DNA. Progerin then interferes with cell function and leads to abnormally rapid aging across many tissues, and as a result, a shortened lifespan.
We can't really understand light without darkness. We cannot understand good without evil. We cannot understand life without the consciousness that we have to meet sister death. And progeria is not an exception. Only together we will find the cure, and we are talking about it.
To bring together the emotions that a family or a patient with rare disease feels of extreme desperation and sadness, pain and joy and happiness and appreciation of life, all those kind of extreme emotions, together with this other world of the people fighting for people like Mila, this sort of almost coldness in a way of the science and the labs and the offices and the conferences and the slide decks and the statistics, and like, how do we reconcile these two very different worlds?
I love you, Mila, and I hope you can feel my love, and you definitely can. From your BFF, Chloe. BFFF. This is a picture of you and me, and it says always together. Yay!
Medicines are now being created in record time. Scientists have the ability to create personalized medicines just like Milson. It may not happen in time to save Mila, but her sacrifice pioneered the way forward.
The essence of biological research is to introduce a single variable and then assess how the complex networks that make us who we are and make us function are influenced. And here we have, for the first time in history, sufficient knowledge to have human beings with a single major variable introduced, a single mutation that's driving enormous phenotypic change. And we have the opportunity now to study those patients.
We've created this really efficient and nimble biotech-esque organization, if you will, that does drug discovery and development on a patient-by-patient basis in a nonprofit fashion.
NLORM is a non-profit biotech foundation founded in 2019 with the goal of researching and creating therapies for rare genetic diseases. Their mission is to accomplish this with antisense oligonucleotides, or ASOs, which do actually make a lot of sense.
But we screen hundreds. For every disease, for every mutation, we started screening like 500 ASOs, so 500 different molecules to try and find the one that we'll take to the clinic.
ASOs are just genetic information converted to usable drugs, and we use the genetic information like a zip code to ship the drug where we want it in the cell to interact with the target that we want and not all the other targets that it might interact with to produce the effect that we desire.
Think of ASOs as molecules that decrease the expression and therefore harmful effects of a mutation. They do this essentially by bear-hugging the mutated RNA, which is like a squiggly little DNA messenger in our cells. Scientists are starting to get excited about ASOs because they can be tailor-made to a single person's unique genetic signature in a relatively cost-effective way. In fact, Mila's condition was treated with an ASO specifically developed for her, called Milasen. This makes her the first person in the world to receive a customized genetic therapy.
Her treatment, which eventually happened within just 1 year of starting to fight for her, which was pretty incredible, thanks to Dr. Tim Yu in Boston Children's Hospital, ended up stopping her disease for an entire year, which was pretty amazing.
It's I think, a truly fundamental advance in therapeutics, considered impossible for many, many decades, because it's broadly enabling. We can use the technology to treat almost any disease and any target. It's incredibly more efficient and therefore much less expensive than other methods of drug discovery and development. It has a higher probability of success. And these are all problems that have plagued the industry for 120 years. And so it represents a truly fundamental change in the way drugs are discovered, the way we think about them, the kinds of information that we take advantage of, and it's consonant with the genetic revolution.
There are so many exciting prospects for gene therapies, not just ASOs, but CRISPR-Cas9, prime editing, and more. So it's important to see where these developments take us. But caring for people with genetic disease extends beyond just physical treatment. What about the other aspects of a life well lived? Finding community, creativity, independence, and support for mental health? Just an hour outside the bustling city of Boston, in South Hadley, Berkshire Hills Music Academy is providing a community for young people with genetic diseases and other disabilities by using the transformative power of music.
In terms of what makes us unique and what's important about what we are doing is, first of all, there's the neurological benefits of music, where music works with the brain's natural neuroplasticity to kind of access different neural pathways that are maybe damaged or maybe underdeveloped or just kind of need to be massaged out in order to kind of access that area of development.
Alright, wonderful. Great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
Yes, time to cruise, baby. 1, 2, 3, 4. I throw my hands up in the air sometimes, saying, hey, oh, gotta let go. I wanna celebrate and live my life.
I have something called Williams syndrome, which I was born with. It's a genetic depletion of chromosome cells in my DNA structure. That's kind of just what we tell people.
Williams syndrome is a rare genetic disease in which a set of 20 to 25 genes are missing from one of our chromosomes, which is essentially an organized package of genes. This is what's known as a deletion mutation, as genetic information is lost or deleted in the DNA replication and cell division processes.
But it makes me very musically talented. I'm in a band called The Capabilities, and we rehearse Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we go out and we go into the community and perform for elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, colleges. A lot of us in the group have different disabilities, so we go out and show that being different isn't a bad thing, and you can do whatever you set your mind to. So, yeah.
Lots of disabled young adults don't have enough courage or confidence to become independent.
I consider not living anymore because I was being made fun of, but I heard a song one day and it saved my life. So music is very, very, very important to me.
Like, to me, Berkshire Hills is the best place to learn how to become a musician if you want to do that as a career. And it's also a great place to gain confidence for anything such as living independently, getting around independently, even getting a job that's not in music.
It's kind of like having a superpower, in a way. Because it doesn't mean you can't do many things. All you have to do is just believe in yourself.
You gotta see your disability as an ability other than a disability. And that's the message we try to give to kids out there. And we perform a lot of cool songs. We mostly do pop, we do rock. Yeah, it's so much fun being in the Capabilities. And you get paid.
I really like getting paid. Getting paid is really important for me because I can go out and then buy stuff that I want for myself. So, being in a group is very important for me. There's a lot of different dynamics. People have different like vocal ranges. I'm an alto myself. Yeah.
This place puts a smile on my face and it's never going out of style. Oh, this is just where I gotta be, at Berkshire Hills Music Academy. You see, this is where I wanna be, wanna stay there for a long, long while. I know here they got many opportunities at Berkshire Hills Music Academy. Where's a place where I can learn circles and social skills no matter where I go, or I wanna go. Where can I gain my independence to learn about the places to where I want to go? That's all I really want to know. Where is the special place where you can make music with your friends and do a lot of fun stuff and all the learning that just won't end? How you know I love learning? 'Cause it's a very amazing place, and I know that
it really taps into a really innate human experience that I think offering that and allowing that space of expression is really important, and then through that lens we're able to really highlight everybody's ability.
The tools that we've got now allow us to try and help kids, even while we're still grasping at understanding of all of the other messy, important details. But at the end of the day, when you sat down and talked to a family about what that meant, with some excitement on our side because we were doing something that was new and cutting edge and scientifically on the frontier, families would say, "That's really great, Dr. Yu, that's fantastic. But how's this going to help my child?"
In Aisha's condition, she was the first child to have a mismatched transplant in Europe.
My story is different from most because I had to undergo a bone marrow transplant when I was just 6 months old. And now I have pulmonary fibrosis, which is a serious lung disease, and my lung capacity is now only 20%. My name is Aisha Chowdhury, and I'm 17 years old.
Aisha had to undergo a bone marrow transplant because of a rare genetic condition called severe combined immunodeficiency, or SCID. This occurs due to a combination of multiple mutations that cause many of the body's immune cells, our main line of defense against invading infections, to become deficient. Pulmonary fibrosis, or lung scarring, was the byproduct of Niren's mismatched bone marrow, which was their only available option.
We were unable to find a bone marrow match for my child because we're Asians, and going to the UK there was not a registry of bone marrow donors that were of our genetic type. So therefore I ended up being the donor, and I was a mismatched donor.
And I must confess that I did wonder if I was going to die. And I would have sleepless nights, just thinking, tossing and turning, with this idea that soon I may be gone. And if that's going to happen, what's the point of anything?
If Aisha had had a perfect match, she would be alive today. But because we didn't have a bone marrow registry that was richer in diversity of the data bank and mainly Anglo-Caucasian donors, we couldn't find an Asian donor, therefore they had to tap into me. I, being a father, was only a 60% match. It was a shot in the dark.
While the science of chemotherapy and transplants is much better understood today, there are still persistent problems with the way that diseases are diagnosed in the first place. Many families whose children display severe symptoms have to embark on costly, tiring, and often traumatic diagnostic odysseys, requiring multiple consultations with many specialists before finally understanding the true nature of their disease.
I have certain aspects of what's going on that have been diagnosed and described very well, but the nature of my particular condition is that it has lots of anomalous features, and it's very hard to predict where it's going, and it's even hard to predict sort of month to month, week to week, sometimes day to day, sometimes over the course of a day, how it's going to behave.
You need to understand what's going on and get a diagnosis in order to be able to know what you're up against and eventually to create a treatment. So it starts there.
Perhaps stepping back and allowing our experience to shape a better understanding of the disease, for doctors to learn more, so that it helps other children, as an important aspect for parents to bear in mind.
When you start having more than one sort of neurological symptom, it doesn't mean you have a rare disease, but it means that someone needs to take that very seriously. And otherwise, if you don't, and the doctors are so afraid of going down that path with a parent, then it ends up taking years and years and years for those families to figure out what's going on with their children.
I think the doctors that really stood out for me were doctors who were empathetic, who were humane, who were compassionate, and who really sort of empathized with the family and the patient, and gave that not just a pure clinical scientific diagnosis and a line of treatment, but cared about the family and cared about the patient.
Often I have wished that there were someone who really was that central coordinating figure who could sort of help me figure it all out.
I think it's a collective responsibility to not let more Aishas die. And I think one of the most powerful ways to do that is to make sure that there is a bone marrow registry that is diverse in terms of its database. So people from different countries, different races, different ethnicities can easily find a donor should one be required.
Technology is not the limiting factor anymore. Science is not the limiting factor. It is the infrastructure and processes that connect the patients to the treatments that we need to work on. We need the system to change with the technology or the science of today. That means the regulatory path. We cannot have the regulator looking at every single step of the way for every single molecule. Why? Because it's just not feasible for anyone. And we cannot have reimbursement, which is the other part of access, be dependent on a traditionally approved medicine, because that's also not possible. So we know what it can't be, which is it cannot be that clinical trials for large groups of people and compassionate use and research and traditional drug approvals that allow for reimbursement, they cannot be the way that is going to scale and be sustainable. Therefore, we really need to rethink what regulatory process looks like, what oversight looks like, and what reimbursement looks like. And if we can solve that, which is a lot, but I know we can do it.
We are doing this so that no child has to have Batten, has to have rare diseases that cut their life short, so that no child has to hear that their 10-year-old friend died because of a rare disease. I know that Mila's still here in her own way. She's a beautiful hummingbird, and she'll be your hummingbird wherever you go.
The song was one of the last songs I sang to Mila before she began coming to us as that hummingbird. If I were a hummingbird, I'd fly right over this entire world, and I'd dream.
I think we'll think entirely differently 10 to 20 years from now about what is health and what is disease. And these patients are the models that are going to teach us that.
We're trying to find things out, and we're operating on incomplete information and trying to take things a step forward.
I'd look down on all my friends, and I would fly by saying,
It is so important for them to know that it is not only what they know, but it's how they treat you with empathy, compassion, understanding, sensitivity. That makes the world of a difference to the lives of the patient, but also the parents who are looking after the patient if it turns out to be a child.
The emotions and the act of being human and trying to help other humans that are sick and dying is truly going to be, I think, what makes the change.
Fly right over this entire world.
And even in that days in which I would like that everything stop, so I would like that everything is finished. I just remember that my life is not only mine, it's also owned by all the people around me. So if I cannot live for myself, I must live for them.
you so much for such a moving film. Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. I would now like to invite Dr. Camp to come and have a conversation with Adrian, and then they will open it up for Q&A from the audience.
I should have put a box of tissues here
Oh, no.
because
Oh,
I'm
gosh.
verklempt.
Oh, thank you.
Beautiful, impactful, so moving, and so critical. I want to take as our point of departure what Stanley Crook said about in 20 years, seems ambitious, but in 20 years, we're going to understand health and disease differently than we do now. Would you talk a bit more about that? Maybe you have an insight into what he meant and what you learned in the making of this film that could mean.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you very much. I think it really gets to the heart of this documentary, which is that the solution and the way forward has to come from a very holistic approach to rare disease and health in general. We can't just get excited for the very promising results of CRISPR-Cas9 and ASOs and other amazing innovations, but we have to always be, medical institutions have to be really in dialogue and in conversation with the patients who they are caring for, and not just kind of in the formal way, but also in a very human way. And so I think it'll come, on the one hand from these amazing medical innovations, but also from a more general understanding of what rare disease is, what health is, and how potentially there's a more expanded definition of health, which isn't just kind of a norm, a medical norm, and then everything outside of that, but understanding that everyone has a very unique makeup of genetics and proteomics, which is the sort of term for like all the proteins in your body, and having that omics approach, which takes into account all these many factors, and mental health and socioeconomic background and race. All these things are really important to understanding what health is, and we need to have that kind of human perspective on it, that more holistic approach.
Thank you. And I think this film, I don't think it's too much to say, has probably made a big step in. We want it to have a wide viewership, because I could see how this would be impactful. For instance, in the level of medical education. So first-year medical students, need to already approach their future patients and how they will develop their medical education with that holistic approach in mind. Certainly.
Absolutely. Education is really, really important. And the reason I love documentary and I love film, and that I wanted to make this film is because I think that people enjoy watching movies and documentaries, and it's a great way for everyone to learn about some things that the filmmaker has in mind. And this is a topic that means a lot to me and is very and very important, I think, that we all keep this in mind going forward. But specifically to talk about medical schools and medical education, I think there's a huge problem with the way that that syllabi and textbooks are kind of administered, and often maybe it's also, well, it is also the kind of greater medical institution, there isn't a lot of care for the patients on a more human and conversational level, just because everything is, the time is money, and it's so expensive and it's so hard to access, and people are so overloaded with work and research and all of that stuff. So it seems like it really is right now the very special cases, the very few doctors who are willing to go outside of what their job entails and what they've been taught, and to really take a risk with people, and to take on projects and important research topics, because even if there isn't a precedent, even if there isn't the literature there necessarily to support it fully, they have to kind of, well, they do use the literature. That's the amazing thing about science, is that it's kind of this continual conversation. But sometimes if the conversation is so geared around all the most common diseases, then we ignore some of the 33 million other people who, around that number, who have been affected by rare genetic disease. So we need to expand the conversation and definitely approach education in a more patient-centered way, and have people from the community, from the areas that many great hospitals are in, actually contribute and have this kind of two-way dialogue where physicians can understand how better to treat a patient.
Yes, and there's a call for interdisciplinarity in that, isn't there? And it was Aisha's father, I think, talked about the best physicians in their experience were the ones who could see her as a person. So that's really moving beyond the science of this affliction she had, this disease, and understanding her from a humanistic point of view as well, which is moving to your background, something that you did, obviously, here at Yale, double major in film studies and, was it molecular biophysics?
Molecular and cellular and developmental biology, which is the kind of umbrella term for just biology, I suppose, at Yale. And yes, I think the interdisciplinary is the most important and fascinating and promising area to look at. And I think that these physicians, these amazing physicians, are looking outside of their discipline to make these important discoveries. And even if it is not a catch-all solution for many, many people, and it's not financially viable yet, we can learn a lot by making that effort. And I'm really, really thankful to the Frankie program, because we're talking about education. I don't think that, even though Yale is an incredible institution with so many opportunities, there is still that pressure to specialize by your second year. Right now there's only the option to double major. We don't have minors at Yale or anything like that. And so it really forces you, even if you're doing two majors, to kind of specialize in those two majors. But the Frankie program struck me as one of I think probably the only opportunity I had found here to get supported for a creative project for something that was really in line with my love for both science and humanities. So I'm really grateful for the support and for the amazing screenings. That I don't know how many people here have been to other Frankie program screenings in the past. Wow, amazing. So you've got the regular crowd here. That's great. I mean, they're incredible, right? And they're so important. And I think it's important that more and more people can come to these events and be inspired to find special combinations of their own interests as well. And maybe that's where we'll find some new solutions.
And in reality, it's really harkening back to an earlier era when physicians were philosophers as well. And, doctors had to be lettered in the arts and really understand the human condition, not just from the singular point of view of science. So it's how it used to be, and at some point we got balkanized for various reasons and in education, and it did a lot of damage, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, that was really the most important creative inspiration for this film. Before I had heard about the world of rare genetic disease, was I really wanted to use my last year at Yale and my thesis project to talk about where science and film overlap, because often I'll say I'm a film and biology major, and you get the sort of classic response of, oh, well, those two things aren't so connected. And in fact, they really are. And I've been fascinated about this for a very long time. In the 17th century, early 17th century, you had magic lanterns, which were the very first type of kind of projection, where you'd have like a lamp and something painted on glass, like a little image or a story, and that would be projected. And then through many innovations and different technological innovations, then we got photography and film. But the very early types of film were anatomical and scientific animations, and understanding the human body. And still to this day, do we have any researchers in the room? But just wondering, anyone who's been in a lab for anything? Okay, no, but I'll explain it. So there's a very big, powerful microscope, for just an example, that many people still use, especially in cancer research, called a confocal spinning disc microscope. And it's really important to note the spinning disc, because that is the exact same disc that is used in cinema projectors to cut in between every little frame very, very quickly, so that you don't see, in those old film cinema projectors, so that you don't see the film blur, so that you kind of see a clear thing between every frame. So the history of science and filmmaking and image making, especially in the West, where the very first documentary, so it's a big debate, but the very first documentary, Nanook of the North, was, you know, an anthropological endeavor that tried to paint. I'm really going off on a big tangent here, but
no, please continue.
Kind of anthropological film where a British anthropologist went to an Inuit population and filmed Inuit people going about their day and doing all sorts of traditions. But in fact, he had them recreate things that they hadn't been doing for hundreds of years. And so it really is, film is really tied to science, and that it's about, especially Western science, we create narratives, we create stories, images, that try to tell a story, a cohesive story about the world. And so by making this documentary, I wanted to try and take that narrative in a different direction and ask questions on both sides to see where we could move forward with the science.
You captured so brilliantly and effectively this tension that ran through the film of isolation and yet the reaching out for community. So these are people who, as I understand it, right, have these terribly, passingly strange and esoteric diseases, right? Disease alone, being sick, you know, being afflicted is a very lonely experience, I'm sure. But then to have this and be so isolated and to be treated, I don't want to say they're treated like medical oddities, but in a sense they are a medical oddity. And you were able to explore that and have them talk about what that tension must be like to live under, and then to also be looking for other people in the world who might have this, but some of them don't, right? That's N of 1.
Absolutely. And I was hoping that would help us all ask a little bit about what the different institutions that we have in our society do to alienate people. And I'm interested in the questions about science, and how science is very much a science of finding curves of best fit and things that lie within kind of an expected range, and any data or information that doesn't necessarily conform with predictions often gets discarded. Not always, because sometimes you get many of those anomalies together and you form a community of kind of exceptions, and then it pushes your research in a new way, which is something I wanted to show a bit with this film. But science is very exclusive, and even the way that we think about microscopes, I mean, you have to prepare so much of what you see before you look at something under a microscope. You have to dissect it very thinly and have a specified dye to see exactly what you're looking for. So it's not a kind of naive process of observation, and as I think sometimes in medical education we're led to think it is. It's like this sort of amazing adventure where we're looking out into the world and seeing what we can discover. Oftentimes those questions have already been decided about what we're trying to discover. And so we need to ask new questions, because the science will only breed, a very small amount of questions from, like ad hoc, post hoc questions of like what we do next. So yeah, I wanted to sort of understand how that feeling of alienation, what that's like, the human story for individuals with rare disease. That was definitely the goal. And I'm not someone who's living with a rare disease, and nor does anyone in my family, but I noticed how common it was whenever I'd bring this conversation up early on, when I was planning this film. Is like so many people, anytime I'd bring it up, someone would raise a hand and say, oh, I know someone, or my family member, or one of my friends is affected by a rare disease. And it dawned on me that this was something that was important, that we need to talk about. And then when I saw that rare disease patients were feeling so alienated, I thought maybe this documentary could bring everyone together. Everyone here today, in our amazing, beautiful audience, and also the subjects together in a kind of and the doctors together in a conversation with one another. And hopefully to just think about this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we could keep going on because I have many questions and lines of inquiry. But Fred has the microphone in the back. Does anybody have any questions for Adrian? Right down here, Fred. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for your wonderful film production and presentation of these stories. My name is Helen. I'm a third-year medical student currently, and I'm interested in applying into internal medicine, and I'm particularly interested in the therapeutic nature of the relationship between a provider who can follow someone so longitudinally and someone living with a chronic disease, right? Whether that is particularly rare or not. My question is, in your interviews with these families and people who are having these experiences, if they had any reflections to offer about their relationship with the first provider that they came to, if it was their primary care provider or their first consultant, because I think often we hear about these tertiary and quaternary centers, like these specialists at the Broad, like Dr. Timothy Yu, who hit the moonshot, right? He hit a kind of a wonderful discovery with Mealison, but the truth of the matter is, like, a lot of patients don't necessarily make it to that quaternary referral stage, or that specialist, that sub-specialist has that time and the bandwidth to sit down with a patient, but not necessarily every primary care doctor does, or the consultant does. We would really like to, right? That's something we aspire to and that we would really like to work towards. But yes, I'm wondering if the families had any reflections on that stage of their care, if they had anybody who was working with them and kind of guiding them up and through this work up until that tertiary or quaternary stage.
Thank you so much for the wonderful question. That is really where I'm hoping the work can be. And it wasn't really elaborated on as much in this documentary, but something that unified every single person I'd met on this journey was that the path to diagnosis of a rare disease is the biggest barrier, on top of access as well to physicians and healthcare, and sequencing methods. And so let me just explain. Most of the time, families such as Mila's will have to go from physician to physician with many different contrasting diagnoses, and eventually they will land on someone who is willing to try something different or see if there's a rare disease or do some kind of sequencing to see that. And from what I was told, a lot of that can be mitigated by really stressing the importance of creating a natural history for families, and also the attitude. It really could be more of a kind of interpersonal improvement that we could see, where patients might be more open-minded and understand what the signs of a rare disease could be, and to potentially test for that earlier on. And then also there's the lack of funding from sort of biotech in general in nano and rare diseases, because I think that's just an area of improvement. We could see more attention, more funding, because right now it's not viable to say that you would want to create a therapy just for one person, which could be millions and millions of dollars. I mean, really, these prices soar. Right now, based on the way that it's structured, it's not viable. And I think we need to really push biotech to understand that these platforms of medicine, and ASOs and CRISPR, Cas9 and the others that I mentioned, could provide a bigger platform for rare disease in general and health in general, understanding sort of genetic mutation in general. So it's kind of difficult to answer how it could be better, but it comes from all these different angles that I tried to show in the film: the funding, the researchers and the physicians, and specifically that diagnosis journey, I think, seemed to be the biggest barrier, where most of the work could be right now. So so that's what I'd offer up of the initial stage.
Thank you. The amount of human suffering. I mean, to as she mentioned, Mila's mother mentioned, possibly years it took, to get to someone who could understand or think enough outside of the box to want to try. You have a sick child, that's untold levels of suffering to begin with, and then to drag yourself and your family through that must just be unfathomable.
It is, and if you get a diagnosis that you have one thing and then you get treated for one thing, but it turns out not to be that, it can worsen symptoms and it can prolong that suffering. And so we're all really on the verge of some big breakthroughs, I think, in rare genetic disease. And we might see that therapies can be created that don't just extend someone's lifespan by 1 year or 10 years, but potentially even more. And we could just, as Frank put it, Stan Crook said, it could really open the way for a new understanding of medicine, I think. And I think the suffering also has to do with also the mental health aspect of things. And if we were to see more funds and schools that had kind of programs that might make Berkshire Hills Music Academy more accessible and widely acknowledged as a form of support, I think we could also see that as well. Because the one last thing I want to say about this, is the families have to, on every time that this happens, the parents have to drop everything that they want, all their plans for their life, for their career, and essentially create a foundation to raise funds for research into something that is affecting their child. So right now we need some kind of systematic change so that families don't have that burden. And that's why I was interested in N-Lorem, because they seem to be a non-profit organization that is trying to be that middle person between the patients and the families who are suffering, and then the biotech funding for that research and for those treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. Revolutionary.
Yeah.
Revolutionary.
And they're the only one, I would love to see more of them.
Absolutely. Other questions? Oh, is this from Mom? Okay, we need to acknowledge Mom because I know Mother's Day has passed, but wow, you must be proud. It's more proud than we are of Adrian.
I was curious about how you came to settle on this particular topic, because as you mentioned, it wasn't something that affected our family. And I was curious when you announced to me, certainly, that this is what you had settled on and that you were passionate about. What brought you to that place?
Thanks for the question, Mom. I think that if you look at just the kind of things I've been interested in making, I don't know why, but my love for science and my love for film have always gotten me to use film and documentary as an investigation of the blind spots of science, the things that it doesn't necessarily account for, and to understand a more human approach and a more human way into science. So as was mentioned earlier in that really wonderful introduction, thank you, I'm interested in ecological conservation and like working with ranchers who might not be open to certain practices or who still need to hunt for sort of financial and also food sustenance, finding like the middle ground there. Another film that I made in my second year here was about vaccine denial in Connecticut. So Connecticut is one of the most prominent kind of vaccine or medical freedom states. So medical freedom is the term, like the self-labeled term of the community of people who reject vaccines and who opt out of them because they want freedom over their own their bodies. And so I was investigating that as well to see whether it wasn't just a black and white conversation of people aren't doing what they want because they want to stick it to the man, and on the other side they're saying, oh, the medical institutions, they don't care about us, and they're trying to put 5G chips in us, and all these kind of different forms of misinformation. I've been always interested in where the two can work together and what can be productive, and so in that documentary I kind of understood that many people who had serious vaccine denial and who were campaigning against vaccines had been wronged in some way by a physician or someone in the medical institution, or who had been made to sign up for something they didn't quite fully understand, and would have benefited from more conversation and open kind of information on things that they were going through. And on the other hand, there needs to be better scientific communication on the side of the medical institution. And so for this documentary, it was understanding rare disease in a similar light of like, how do we find some solutions that don't just come from my scientific education, but also from people who are actually experiencing it, and families who've been through everything, who've seen the whole system, the regulatory failures of the medical system, and who have things to say about it, have ways they really, really want to improve it, asking them for their advice, while also seeing what some of the ways that could be fused with the promising scientific innovations. That's the core of it, is finding the kind of 80% that we can agree on versus the 20% that we might not be able to agree on.
Beautiful. And beautifully put. Before we repair to our dinner reception, I'm going to preempt what's probably everybody's question, and that is, what is next for you? Next film, next adventure?
Well,
tell us.
Documentaries, for me at least, are so organic. They come up. This idea for this documentary came from a conversation with a family friend who who sort of worked in a biotech company, Ilana Fogelman. And it has evolved so much. It has mutated and taken new shape every single day that I've worked on it, every single interview. And I think keeping an open mind to new information about this field and just about science in general is something that I'm going to keep going forward. So I would love to keep making these documentaries, maybe to even be a scientific communicator, to use this platform of documentary to kind of make science more relevant to people who love watching films and who love just talking about things that they see. So that's my goal. But the specific topic, I haven't had any ideas for that yet. But I'm very open if anyone has suggestions. So please do come to me with anything that you found, any stories or experiences that you think would be worth telling.
Ladies and gentlemen, you met him here first, Adrian Rollet, because we think you're going on to very big things. And we're so proud to have you as a Frankie Fellow. So now for our dinner reception upstairs, Fred will shepherd everybody. It's a bit labyrinthine path to get there. So if you haven't been here before, Fred will show you the way. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming.